I needed the money. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the employee parking lot at Sunset Cove Water Park. The Miami sun beat down on my car, which didn't have working AC, and I was already sweating through my t-shirt before I even turned off the engine. The online job listing had promised competitive pay for lifeguards, and as a broke college student heading into my junior year, I couldn't afford to be picky. My swim team experience made me qualified, at least on paper. I grabbed my backpack, locked my car, and headed toward the staff entrance. The park wasn't open to the public yet. I checked my watch. 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes early for my 8:30 meeting with the manager. Good start, I thought. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt with the Sunset Cove logo waved me over as I approached the gate. He had the weathered look of someone who spent too much time in the Florida sun. "Michael Reynolds?" he asked. "That's me," I said, extending my hand. "Everyone calls me Mike." "Robert Martinez, park manager." His handshake was firm. "Glad to have you on board. Your swimming credentials are impressive. 4 years on your college team?" "Yeah, though I'm taking a break this year to focus on classes." Robert nodded and began leading me through the empty park. The place was eerily quiet without visitors, just the sound of pumps running and water flowing through the various attractions. We passed the wave pool, a lazy river, and several twisting slides that rose up overhead. "We run a tight ship here," Robert said as we walked. "Safety is our priority. We haven't had a major incident in years, and I'd like to keep it that way." Something about the way he emphasized major incident made me curious, but I didn't ask. Instead, I nodded and tried to look appropriately serious about water safety. Robert stopped at a door marked Staff Only and swiped his key card. "This is our break room and locker area. You'll meet John Sullivan inside. He's been with us for, well, longer than anyone. He'll show you the ropes and go over some specific procedures we have here at Sunset Cove." The break room was small but clean, with a mini fridge, microwave, and a few tables. A man sat at one of them, staring at a cup of coffee. He looked up when we entered. "John, this is Michael, our new lifeguard." "Michael, John Sullivan." John didn't smile or stand. He just looked at me with eyes that were very alert and watchful for someone sitting in a break room. His skin was rough and weathered from years in the harsh Florida sun. He looked to be in his late 40s, but moved quickly like someone much younger when he finally stood up. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," Robert said, already backing toward the door. "John will go over everything you need to know." He gave John a nod that seemed loaded with meaning before leaving. For a moment, John and I just stood there in awkward silence. I was about to make a joke about the weather when he spoke. "You swim competitively?" It wasn't a question. "Yeah, 4 years in college." "That's good. You'll need to be strong." He picked up a red folder from the table. "Your uniform and rotation schedule are in here. First shift starts at the wave pool, noon to 4, but before that..." John reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it on the table and pushed it toward me. "These are the rules. Learn them." I looked down at the handwritten list. 1. Stay in your chair during drownings until backup arrives. 2. If you see a woman behind the maintenance shed after hours, ignore her. 3. If a man waves to you from the deep end of the pool, wave back exactly once. 4. Never open or use the blue locker in the staff locker room. 5. Alert me immediately if fog appears over any water. Regardless of weather, I read the list twice, waiting for John to crack a smile or say it was a joke. He didn't. His face stayed completely serious. "Is this some kind of hazing thing for new employees?" I asked with a nervous laugh. John's expression didn't change. "Follow these rules or you'll die." The bluntness of his statement caught me off guard. "No, you might get fired, or it's for your safety, just you'll die." "Okay, sure," I said, trying to play along. "Stay in the chair, avoid creepy women, wave at pool men, no blue locker, watch for spooky fog. Got it." "This isn't a joke, Michael." His voice had dropped lower. "These rules keep people alive. I nodded, not sure what else to do. Clearly, this guy took whatever weird tradition this was very seriously. Maybe it was some elaborate prank the staff played on newcomers. I'd go along with it for now. I understand, I said, trying to sound sincere. John studied my face for a moment, then seemed satisfied. Get changed. I'll show you around before your shift starts. The locker room was standard, rows of metal lockers, showers, bathroom stalls. John pointed me to an empty locker where I could store my things. You can use any unclaimed locker except the blue one, I know. I finished for him, still thinking this was all some weird game. As I changed into the red shorts and tank top with lifeguard printed across the chest, John waited by the door. He seemed tense, his eyes always moving, checking corners and shadows. The tour of the park was thorough but strange. John didn't just show me where everything was. He showed me exactly where to watch, how to keep my eyes on the water, and which paths to take between stations. He went over the safety rules with a seriousness that seemed over the top for a pool job. Always scan the bottom of the pool every 30 seconds, he said as we stood by the edge of the main pool. Count the people in your zone when you start your shift, then count again every 5 minutes. Standard lifeguard procedure. But the way he said it made it sound like a special routine. By the time noon rolled around, I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake taking this job. But the thought of my empty bank account kept me climbing up to the high chair overlooking the wave pool as guests began packing into the park. The first few hours of my shift were normal enough. Kids splashing, teenagers showing off, parents trying to relax while keeping an eye on their children. I stayed alert, blew my whistle a few times at runners, and helped a lost child find his mother. I noticed John wasn't sitting in his chair by the deep end of the main pool. He was standing beside it, his posture stiff, eyes always looking at the water. Not just casually watching, but staring with such focus it was like he expected something to come up from the bottom at any moment. He hardly blinked. When my break came, I headed to the staff room where I met a few other lifeguards. They seemed normal enough, talking about guests and upcoming shifts. I wanted to ask about John and his strange rules, but something stopped me. Instead, I ate my sandwich and listened to their conversations, trying to catch any hint that they found the place as weird as I was beginning to think it was. The rest of my shift was quiet. As closing time approached, the number of guests got smaller. The announcement for final swim came over the loudspeakers, and 30 minutes later, the park was empty except for staff. I was helping clean up some trash when I noticed John making his rounds, but they weren't casual walks around the park. They were careful, thorough checks of every pool, every water feature. He would stop at specific points, stare into the water for exactly the same amount of time, then move to the next spot. It looked less like end-of-day inspection and more like some kind of strange routine. When I finished my duties, I headed back to the locker room to change. That's when I saw it, the blue locker. Somehow I'd missed it earlier. While all the other lockers were a standard gray metal, this one was painted a deep blue. And now that I was alone in the room, I noticed something else. Faint black stains around its edges, like something had leaked out and been quickly cleaned up. Rule 4 suddenly felt less like a joke. That locker gave me the creeps. I changed quickly, keeping my back to it, unable to shake the feeling that something inside might be listening, waiting. As I walked to my car in the evening light, I couldn't help glancing back at the main pool, still visible through the fence. The water should have been still, with the pumps turned off for the night. It wasn't. Across the surface, a ripple moved from one end to the other, as if something had just passed beneath, something big. I stood frozen, watching until the water went still again. Then I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away much faster than the parking lot speed limit allowed. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself. Maybe a pump was still running. But I knew better, and suddenly, John's rules didn't seem like hazing anymore. I spent the night trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I thought I saw in that pool. The ripple could have been anything. A leaf blown across the surface, a pump still running, maybe even my imagination after a long first day. But no matter how I rationalized it, I kept circling back to John's rules and his deadly serious warning. I barely slept. The next day at the park was busy enough to keep my mind occupied, but I found myself watching John more closely. The way he walked the deck, eyes always looking around the water, stopping at exact spots to stare at certain areas. It wasn't normal lifeguard behavior. Not even close. 2 days after receiving those strange rules, I was stationed at the lazy river, sitting in the high chair that gave me a clear view of the winding artificial waterway. The summer heat beat down hard, and the water shined under the midday sun as guests floated by on colorful tubes. I kept checking left to right, top to bottom, watching for any signs of trouble. That's when I noticed her. A small girl, maybe 8 years old, who had somehow slipped off her tube in the deeper section where the river curved behind a rock formation. Her head bobbed up once, arms waving wildly, before she went under again. My body tensed, ready to jump. I'd done dozens of water rescues during my time on the swim team, but then John's first rule flashed in my mind. Stay in your chair during drownings until backup arrives. Everything in my training screamed against it. Every instinct told me to dive in. My hand closed around my whistle, ready to blow the emergency signal, when something caught my eye. John was already in the water. He moved through the current with impossible speed, reaching the girl in seconds. The thing was, I'd seen him not 30 seconds earlier on the opposite side of the park, checking chlorine levels at the wave pool. There was no way he could have made it across the park that quickly, let alone spotted the drowning child from that distance. But there he was, lifting the girl's head above water, securing her small body against his chest as he swam one-armed to the edge. A woman, presumably the girl's mother, was already running along the concrete, her face showing pure panic. "Lily!" she screamed, reaching for her daughter as John handed the coughing, sputtering child up to waiting hands. "She's okay," John assured the mother, his voice calm and steady. "Just swallowed some water. Have the first aid station check her, but she'll be fine." The woman clutched her daughter tightly, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you. Oh God, thank you. I only looked away for a second." "It happens," John said, pulling himself out of the water. "She's safe now." As the mother carried her daughter toward the first aid station, guests around the lazy river were already returning to their tubes and floats, the brief emergency already fading from their minds. I climbed down from my chair once my replacement arrived for my scheduled break. John was toweling off nearby, seemingly unfazed by what had just happened. "How did you get to her so fast?" I asked, keeping my voice low. "You were at the wave pool." John looked at me, water still dripping from his leathery skin. "You stayed in your chair. Good." "But I was going to call for backup. She was drowning." "Rule 1 exists for a reason." He draped the towel around his neck. "What would have happened if we both left our posts? Who would be watching the water?" It made sense from a safety protocol standpoint, but it didn't explain how he'd moved across the park so quickly or how he'd even seen the girl in trouble from that distance. "I was going to blow my whistle," I said. "Next time, do that first, but always stay in your chair until someone comes." He turned to walk away, then paused. "You're on closing shift tonight?" I nodded. "Remember the rules," he said, his voice dropping lower. "All of them." The rest of the afternoon passed without incident. As evening approached, the crowds thinned, families packing up towels and sunscreen, heading for the exits. The park closed at 8 p.m., but employees stayed until 9 to clean and prepare for the next day. Darkness settled over Sunset Cove as I made my rounds, checking for lost items and making sure no guests had stayed behind. The underwater lights in the pools cast an eerie blue glow across the deck. Without the screams of children and the constant splashing, the park took on a completely different atmosphere. Quiet, watchful, waiting. I was near the competition pool when I heard it. A woman's voice, soft but clear in the evening stillness. "Help me. Please, someone." I turned toward the sound. It seemed to be coming from behind the maintenance shed, a small building tucked between the slides and the fence marking the park boundary. "Is someone there?" I called out, already walking in that direction. "The park is closed. Please, I'm hurt." As I rounded the corner of the shed, I saw her, a woman in a white bathing suit standing with her back partially turned toward me. Long, wet hair hung down, hiding her face. Water pooled at her feet while the concrete around her was completely dry. Rule 2 popped into my mind. If you see a woman behind the maintenance shed after hours, ignore her. I stopped cold. Every instinct told me to help someone in distress, but John's warning, "Follow these rules or you'll die," stuck in my head. "I need help," the woman said, her voice somehow both distant and too close. She began to turn toward me, wet hair still covering her face. "Please don't leave me alone." It took everything I had to turn my back on her. Every step away felt wrong on a fundamental level. "Why won't you help me?" Her voice changed, taking on a desperate edge. "I know you can hear me." I kept walking, my heart pounding in my chest. "Don't leave me here." The scream that followed didn't sound fully human. It was too raw, too hollow, like it was coming from somewhere deep underwater. I walked faster, fighting the urge to run, to look back. The woman's pleas turned to sobbing, then to something that sounded like rage. Just as I reached the main pool deck, the sound stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was almost worse. "You did well." I nearly jumped out of my skin. John stood a few feet away, watching me with those two alert eyes. "Jesus, you scared me." "But you followed the rule," he said with a nod of approval. "Despite what you were feeling. That woman..." I glanced back toward the maintenance shed. "Shouldn't we check if she's okay?" "She's not real. Not anymore." John's gaze followed mine, his expression grim. "Whatever she is, she's been here since before I started." A chill ran through me despite the warm night air. "What do you mean, not real?" "Some things look human but aren't. That's all you need to know for now." He shifted his focus back to me. "The rules keep you safe from things most people never have to see." I wanted to ask more questions, but something in John's face told me I wouldn't get straight answers. Instead, I helped finish the closing tasks, constantly looking over my shoulder, feeling like someone was watching me from every shadow. When I finally got home that night, I couldn't forget the image of the woman in white, or John's unclear explanation. I was at my laptop typing Sunset Cove Water Park history into the search bar. Most results were just ads and reviews, but on page 3 I found a link to an old newspaper archive. The article from 1978 described the park's construction. Local businessman William Sullivan breaks ground on new water attraction. There were concerns about building over the natural sinkhole that took 3 lives earlier this decade. I clicked through to related articles, finding brief mentions of 3 separate drowning incidents in 1975 and 1976 before the land was developed. 2 young men and a woman had drowned in the waters that had filled the sinkhole after heavy rains. The woman's name was Claire Mitchell. She was 23 years old when she drowned. The article mentioned she was last seen wearing a white swimsuit. I closed my laptop and sat in the darkness of my apartment. Sleep seemed impossible now. What had I gotten myself into? More importantly, what was I going to do about it? Quitting seemed like the obvious answer, but something told me it wouldn't be that simple. As I lay in bed, I kept seeing the pale woman behind the maintenance shed, hearing her inhuman scream, and underneath it all was the question I couldn't shake. How had John moved across the entire park in seconds to save that little girl? A week into working at Sunset Cove had changed me. I'd gone from laughing off John's rules to jumping at shadows and researching drownings from the 1970s. Meeting that woman in white really freaked me out. But like any broke college student who needed money, I kept showing up for my shifts. The Tuesday afternoon sun was hot on my shoulders as I watched over the main pool from my lifeguard chair. The heat brought out a good crowd, families splashing in the shallow end, teenagers showing off on the diving board, and a few adults swimming laps in their lanes. Just normal summer stuff at what seemed like a normal water park. I'd been looking back and forth across my zone, just like John taught me. Left to right, top to bottom, checking the pool floor, then the surface, then the deck. The pattern had almost become relaxing. That's when I noticed something weird in the deep end. The water was moving strangely, not from swimmers or the filters, but from below, circles spreading out from a spot where nobody was swimming. None of the guests seemed to notice. They kept splashing and laughing, not seeing what was happening. I leaned forward in my chair, trying to see better through the sun's reflection on the water. The circles got bigger, and then I saw it. A dark shape coming up slowly from the bottom of the pool. My throat went dry. I grabbed the arms of my chair, ready to blow my whistle when the shape came close to the surface. It looked like a man with really pale skin, floating straight up and down in the water. As I watched, unable to move, he rose until his head and shoulders came out of the water. He raised his hand in a wave, water running down his arm. Rule 3 popped into my head. If a man waves to you from the deep end of the pool, wave back exactly once. I felt nervous as I raised my hand and waved back, just once like I was supposed to. The pale man stayed there for a moment, water splashing around his shoulders. His face looked weirdly unclear. Then, slowly, he began to sink back down. The water closed over his head, the circles slowly stopped, and the pool went back to normal. I sat stiff in my chair, sweating not just from the heat. Had anyone else seen it? I looked around at the guests, but everyone just kept doing what they were doing, with no idea what had just happened. When my replacement came for my break, I climbed down from the chair on wobbly legs. "You okay?" asked my replacement, a guy named Drew who'd started a few days before me. "You look like you saw a ghost." "Just the heat," I mumbled, not trusting myself to say more. In the break room, I found Emily eating a sandwich at one of the tables. She'd been working at Sunset Cove for 3 summers now, according to what I'd overheard. If anyone besides John knew what was going on, it would be her. I grabbed my lunch from the fridge and sat across from her. For a minute, I just ate in silence, trying to find the right words. "Hey, Emily," I finally said, keeping my voice low despite us being alone. "Can I ask you something?" She looked up, wariness immediately crossing her face. "Depends on what it is." "Have you ever seen anything strange in the water? Things that shouldn't be there?" Emily's expression closed off completely. She set down her sandwich and looked toward the door as if checking whether anyone might walk in. "You've been talking to John," she said. Not a question. "He gave me the rules on my first day." She nodded slightly. "Good. Listen to him. But what are these things? The woman behind the shed? The man in the pool?" "Stop!" Emily cut me off, her voice sharp. "Just follow John's rules," she whispered, leaning closer. "That's how you survive here." "So you've seen them too?" She didn't confirm or deny it, but the look in her eyes told me everything. Emily had seen things, maybe worse than what I'd encountered so far. 3 summers, I said. "How have you lasted that long?" "I pay attention. I do exactly what John says." She gathered the remains of her lunch. "You should too, if you want to make it through the season." As she stood to leave, I asked one more question. "What happens if you break the rules?" Emily paused at the door. "Ask Robert about last summer's staff." Then she was gone. I sat alone in the break room, my appetite gone. Through the small window, I could see John walking around, stopping here and there to look into each pool. What did he see that the rest of us missed? With 20 minutes left in my break, curiosity got the better of me. The door to Robert's office was open, but he wasn't inside. On a hunch, I checked the filing cabinet in the corner. The top drawer was unlocked with employee files inside. I thumbed through the folders quickly, looking at dates. Current season, last season, the season before that. I pulled out the file for last summer and spread the papers on Robert's desk. The staff roster showed 15 lifeguards at the start of the season. By August, only 7 remained. Next to the names of those who'd left were brief notes. Resigned, personal reasons. Terminated, rule violation. Terminated, unauthorized access. 2 files were marked simply as status unknown, with strange symbols drawn in red ink at the bottom of the page. I flipped through more records, finding a pattern. Every summer, Sunset Cove lost nearly half its staff before the season ended. Way too many people quit, even for a summer job. Some personnel files had those same red symbols marked on them. They looked like nothing I'd ever seen. Not letters or numbers, but weird shapes that were hard to look at for long. The sound of footsteps in the hallway sent me scrambling to return the files to the cabinet. I had just closed the drawer when Robert appeared in the doorway. "Michael," he said, surprise evident in his voice. "What are you doing in here?" "Sorry," I said, hoping I didn't look as guilty as I felt. The door was open. I was looking for the sunscreen we keep for guests. Someone asked for some at my station. Robert's eyes narrowed slightly, but he nodded toward a cabinet on the other wall. "Top shelf. Make sure you get back to your post on time." "Will do," I said, grabbing a bottle of sunscreen as cover before heading out. For the rest of my shift, I couldn't stop thinking about those files and the strange symbols. Every time I looked at the deep end of the pool, I half expected to see the pale man rising again. As the day ended and guests began to leave, I noticed Robert watching me from the office window. Several times throughout the afternoon, I caught him giving me concerned looks. It was making me nervous. During closing procedures, as I was cleaning up some trash near the snack bar, Robert approached me. "How are you settling in, Michael?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes watchful. "Fine," I said. "Everyone's been helpful." Robert nodded, looking out over the now empty pools. "John tells me you've been following the protocols well." I knew he wasn't talking about standard lifeguard procedures. "I'm trying to." "Good." He hesitated, then added, "We lost 3 lifeguards last summer. They either quit without notice or..." He trailed off. "Or what?" I prompted. Robert's expression tightened. "Or they disappeared. One day here, the next gone. No calls, no texts, personal items still in their lockers. What happened to them?" "They broke the rules," he said simply. Then, seeing my reaction, he added, "John knows what he's doing. Without him, we'd all be gone. This place, it needs someone like him." "What is this place?" I asked. "What's really going on here?" Robert checked his watch, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of our conversation. "Ask John if you want details. Just know that following his instructions isn't optional. It's survival." He left then, leaving me with more questions than answers. As I finished my closing duties, I looked around for John, but he seemed to have disappeared after his final rounds. The sun was setting as I walked to my car. I kept thinking about what Robert had said. People had disappeared here. Not just quit, but vanished. And everyone talked about it like it was normal, expected even. I was halfway home when I stopped at a red light near the beach access road. As I waited for the light to change, something on the street corner caught my eye. A figure in white. My blood went cold. It was her, the woman from behind the maintenance shed. She stood perfectly still amid the moving pedestrians, her long, wet hair partially obscuring her face. Even from this distance, I could see water pooling at her feet. I blinked, and she was gone. The car behind me honked as the light turned green. I drove on, gripping the steering wheel tightly. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The pale man in the pool, the woman in white now appearing outside the park. It was as if they were following me, learning about me. I thought about quitting. I should quit. Any sane person would walk away from whatever was happening at Sunset Cove. But as I stared at the ceiling, I realized I couldn't. Something about that place had its hooks in me now. Whether it was curiosity or something darker, I felt trapped, not just by my need for the paycheck, but by a growing obsession with understanding what lurked beneath the surface of those pools. I'd survived a week following John's rules, but how much longer could my luck hold out? And what would happen when the entities decided that simply watching me wasn't enough? 3 weeks into my job at Sunset Cove Water Park, I was getting used to the weird routine, watching the water, helping lost kids find their parents, and following John's mysterious rules that kept me alive. I'd seen the woman in white and the man who waved from the deep end. I'd done my research on the park's dark history, but nothing prepared me for what happened next. I pulled into the employee parking lot that morning and immediately noticed something wrong. 4 police cars were at the main entrance with their lights flashing. I felt nervous as I parked and rushed toward the staff entrance. Small groups of employees stood together talking quietly. Robert was by the gate talking to 2 officers, looking worried. Before I could get close enough to hear what they were saying, John showed up beside me. "What's going on?" I asked. John looked toward the officers, then back at me. "Drew didn't go home last night. His roommate called it in." Drew, the part-time lifeguard who'd started a few days before me. Nice kid, always joking around in the break room. I'd covered his station a few times when he needed a break. "Did you tell him about the rules?" John asked suddenly, his voice dropping low. I shook my head. "No, I didn't think—" John's face darkened. "He went into the blue locker. Nothing left of him now." I felt cold even though it was hot that morning. "How do you know?" "The locker was open this morning, and there's always residue." He didn't explain further, and I wasn't sure I wanted him to. Robert finished with the police and called us together. He explained that Drew hadn't returned home after his closing shift and that officers would be checking the premises. We would open as scheduled, but some areas might be temporarily closed for the investigation. As everyone headed to their stations, John grabbed my arm. "Be extra careful today," he warned. "When something like this happens, the others get excited." "The others?" I asked. "The woman in white? The man in the pool?" John nodded once. "And worse things. They smell death." He left before I could ask anything else, leaving me with the awful picture of Drew opening that blue locker after everyone had gone home. What had happened to him? What was inside that thing? The morning went by in a rush of whistles and putting sunscreen on kids. I was working at the wave pool, watching families splash and scream as the fake waves came in every 15 minutes. But I couldn't stop thinking about Drew and what John had said. After lunch, I switched to the kiddie pool, a shallow, colorful area with tiny slides and water sprays. It was usually an easy spot. Parents stayed close to their toddlers, and the water barely reached the kids' knees. I sat in the chair, looking over the water like John had taught me. That's when I saw it. Small strips of mist showing up just above the water. Not steam, the water wasn't heated, but thin curls of fog coming from the shallow pool. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks, but the mist was definitely there, getting thicker each second. Rule 5 hit me. Alert John immediately if fog appears over any water. I grabbed the radio clipped to my shorts. "John, it's Michael. There's fog over the kiddie pool." The radio buzzed for a second before John's voice came through, tense and quick. "Don't move, I'm coming." Within moments, John was running across the deck, moving faster than seemed possible for a man his age. When he saw the mist now making a layer over the kiddie pool, he yelled to the nearest staff, "Full evacuation, now!" Robert appeared beside him, took one look at the fog, and grabbed the microphone for the PA system. His voice boomed across the park. "Attention all guests. Due to an unexpected maintenance issue, Sunset Cove Water Park is closing immediately. Please make your way calmly to the exits where you will receive a full refund or rain check. Other lifeguards began helping guests out of the pools and toward the exits. Parents grabbed confused children. Teenagers complained, but everyone moved. I stood from my chair, ready to help, but John grabbed my arm. "Stay with me," he ordered. "We need to contain it." The mist was spreading fast now, not just over the kiddie pool, but stretching toward the larger pools and water features. Within minutes, thick fog covered the entire aquatic area, cutting visibility to just a few feet. The air turned cold, raising goosebumps on my arms and legs even in the summer heat. Through the fog, I saw things moving, tall, thin shadows sliding between the pools. They moved in a strange way, leaving no footprints on the wet concrete. "What are those?" I whispered, pointing. John didn't look. "Don't acknowledge them. Don't speak to them. Don't even look at them directly." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that caught the dim light. A small metal disc covered with symbols similar to those I had seen in the employee files. He pressed it into my palm. "Hold this until the fog clears," he said. "Don't let go of it, no matter what you see or hear." The amulet was warm on my skin, and it seemed to buzz with energy. John pulled out another one for himself, then started walking a specific pattern around the pool deck, stopping at certain spots to say words I couldn't understand. I stayed close behind, holding the amulet tightly. The shapes in the fog grew more numerous and bolder. They moved around us, just out of clear sight, looking strange and wrong, like their arms were too long and they bent in ways they shouldn't. Strange sounds filled the air, not quite words, but sounds that almost made sense, like a language I'd forgotten. One shape came closer than the others, its top part tilting like it was looking at us. John stepped between it and me, holding up his amulet. The shape moved back, sliding into the thickest part of the fog. We kept walking this weird route for what felt like hours, John following his path while I stayed behind him, holding the amulet. Slowly, the fog started to clear. The shapes backed away, the strange sounds stopped, and it got warmer. By late afternoon, the fog was completely gone, leaving the pools as calm as ever. John took back the amulet, looking extremely tired. "It's over, for now." "What was that?" I asked. "What were those things in the fog?" "The less you know about them, the safer you are," he said, putting both amulets in his pocket. "Check the pool edges. There will be marks." Sure enough, when I looked closely at the concrete edges of the pools, I found long scratch marks, 3 parallel lines, 2 evenly spaced to be random, 2 deep to be made by human nails. They circled each pool as if something had been trying to claw its way out of the water. Robert announced over the PA system that the park would reopen. Guests who had stayed for their rain checks began coming back in, completely unaware of what had just happened. The other lifeguards returned to their posts, many looking shaken but saying nothing about the evacuation or the fog. During my break, I found Emily in the staff room looking at her untouched lunch. "You've seen it before, haven't you?" I asked, sitting across from her. "The fog." She nodded slowly. "Twice. Once my first summer, once last year." Her voice was flat, empty. "It's always the same. The fog comes, those things appear, John walks his pattern." "What are they?" Emily shrugged. "John never says exactly, just that they want to get out." "Out of what?" "The water. Out of wherever they're trapped." She looked up at me then, her eyes haunted. "I've worked here 3 summers, and I've only survived because of John. He's more than a lifeguard," she explained. "He's a guardian." "Guardian of what?" Emily looked around, then leaned closer. "This place isn't just a water park. It's a prison or a gateway or something. John keeps whatever's on the other side from getting through." After my shift ended, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I drove to the county library, wanting to find out more about Sunset Cove and John's family. The old librarian helped me access their digital newspaper archives, and I looked for articles about the park's development. Most were basic business stories, groundbreaking ceremonies, opening day celebrations, economic impact reports. but one article from 1978 caught my eye. Sullivan Water Park opens despite local opposition. The piece quoted several community members who opposed the park's construction, citing concerns about the land's history. One local historian claimed William Sullivan, the developer and John's grandfather, had made unorthodox arrangements to secure the property and permits. I kept digging and found an obscure weekly paper that had published a series of investigative articles about the park's construction. The reporter had interviewed former workers who talked about weird things at the building site, tools that moved overnight, unexplained cold spots, and strange sounds coming from the natural sinkhole that would later become the main pool. The most disturbing article talked about 3 construction workers who disappeared during a single week in 1977. The men had been working on the plumbing system that connected water to and from the sinkhole. They had reportedly complained about something moving in the water. Days before they vanished. The case was never solved. In a follow-up piece, the reporter hinted at occult arrangements made by William Sullivan to ensure the park's success, though no specific accusations were made. The reporter tried to interview Sullivan about these claims, but was turned away. Shortly after, the series of articles stopped abruptly, with no explanation. I sat back in my chair, trying to make sense of what I'd read. John wasn't just enforcing random rules, he was containing whatever his grandfather had unleashed during the park's construction. The blue locker, the woman in white, the man in the pool, the shadows in the fog, all connected to William Sullivan's occult arrangements. And now Drew was gone, just like those construction workers decades ago. Was anything left of him? Or had he simply vanished, another sacrifice to whatever was hiding beneath Sunset Cove? As I drove home that night, I couldn't stop thinking about those scratch marks around the pools or the tall shadows moving through the fog. For 3 weeks, I'd been swimming in those same waters, watching over children playing in them, all while something waited beneath the surface. I thought about quitting, just walking away from Sunset Cove and never coming back. But somehow I knew it wasn't that simple. As Emily had said, John was a guardian, and now I understood what he was protecting us from. The question was, could he contain it forever? And what would happen to all of us if he failed? I cursed under my breath as I drove back toward Sunset Cove Water Park. After a month of working there, surviving supernatural encounters, and learning the weird rules that kept me alive, I'd gone and made a rookie mistake, leaving my wallet in the break room. I'd already gotten home when I realized it was missing, probably fallen out of my back pocket when I changed after my shift. The bright Miami moon lit up the empty parking lot as I pulled in. The park looked different at night, more scary without the happy families and splashing kids. Just big water slides and still pools, waiting. I used my key to enter through the service entrance, the metal door creaking as I pushed it open. The hallway lights were on their night setting, dim fluorescence giving just enough light to see by. My footsteps bounced against the concrete floor as I made my way toward the staff area. The main pool deck was almost completely dark except for the safety lights underwater that stayed on all night. Those lights made strange, rippling patterns across the walls and ceiling. I'd walked this way dozens of times during daylight hours, but now each shadow made me tense. Something moved, and I froze. There was someone in the competition pool. The underwater lights showed a person swimming laps with strong, steady strokes. I squinted, trying to make out who would be swimming at this hour. As the swimmer reached the wall nearest me and turned, I saw John's face. He must have stayed late for some reason. Maybe this was part of his guardian duties, checking the water itself. As if noticing me, John stopped mid-lap and treaded water, looking my way. He raised his hand in a friendly wave. I paused, remembering all the times John had warned me, saved me, guided me through all this supernatural stuff. Without him, I would have broken rules and likely disappeared like Drew. I felt grateful as I started walking toward the edge of the pool, raising my hand to wave back. "Michael." A woman's voice called my name from the direction of the locker rooms. I turned quickly. She stood about 20 feet away. The woman in white I'd seen behind the maintenance shed and later on the street corner. Except something was different. Her wet hair was pulled back from her face now, showing features that looked more human than I remembered. Her expression seemed concerned, even protective. "Michael, don't go to him," she pleaded, her voice gentle and urgent. "That's not John." I froze, caught between them. The John in the pool continued treading water, watching me, waiting for something. The woman took a cautious step forward. Water pooled at her feet, even though the concrete floor was dry. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The real danger isn't me," she insisted, taking another step closer. "It never was. You've been told lies." My mind raced. John had always warned me about her. Rule 2 was explicitly about ignoring any woman behind the maintenance shed, but she hadn't been behind the shed tonight. She was here in the main building. Did the rules still apply? And if that wasn't the real John in the pool? I glanced back at the pool. The man who looked like John smiled, but there was something off about it. Too wide, too fake. He raised his hand to wave again, more insistently this time. The woman was only 10 feet away now. "I've been trying to warn you," she said. "He's the one who takes people. He took Drew." As she came closer, I could see her face more clearly in the dim light. She looked so normal, so genuinely concerned. But as I watched, something changed. A patch of skin near her temple rippled and peeled back slightly, revealing something gray and textured underneath that wasn't skin at all. She didn't seem to notice it happening. "Stay back," I said, taking a step backward. She kept coming, her expression still concerned, still human, except for that peeling patch that was growing larger. "Michael, please, you have to trust me. We don't have much time." Her jaw moved strangely as she spoke, as if the hinges were loosening. Something was very wrong. Suddenly, someone tackled me from behind and knocked me to the ground. I rolled over, ready to fight, then saw it was John, the real one, not the one in the pool. He looked like he was struggling. "Get up, run!" he shouted, pulling me to my feet. Behind us, the woman let out an inhuman shriek. I looked back and saw her face splitting open, the jaw dropping far lower than any human anatomy would allow, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. The skin of her face continued peeling back like wet paper, showing the true creature beneath. At the same moment, the John thing in the pool rose partially out of the water. The upper body still maintained its human appearance, but below the chest, the shape bloated outward into something corpse-like and ugly. Its arms stretched as it pulled itself partly onto the pool deck, fingers extending into claw-like appendages. Both creatures shrieked in unison, a coordinated hunting call that made my blood freeze. "Move!" John yelled, dragging me toward the exit. We ran across the pool deck, the sound of wet, slapping footsteps close behind us. John pulled me through a side door I hadn't used before, slamming it shut and jamming a mop handle through the handles. "That won't hold them long," he gasped, already moving again. "We need to get outside the main building." "What the hell were those things?" I panted as we ran down a dark maintenance corridor. "They work together," John said between labored breaths. "Always have. One in the water, one on land. They need your permission to take you, a wave, a response, anything." We burst through another door into the staff parking area. John didn't stop until we reached my car. "Get in," he ordered. "Start it up." I fumbled with my keys, hands shaking. "My wallet." "Forget it," John snapped. "We need to leave. Now." As the engine roared to life, I saw some movement at the service entrance. Two figures standing side by side, watching us. One was dripping wet, the other completely dry, though there was a puddle forming at her feet. They weren't pursuing us anymore, just watching. John got into the passenger seat. "Drive," he said. "We need to talk." John didn't say much as I drove us away from Sunset Cove that night. He just kept looking out the rear window, watching for any sign we were being followed. I took us on a winding route through residential areas, avoiding main roads near any bodies of water. Neither of us suggested stopping anywhere. The night was full of shadows, and I didn't trust any of them. We ended up at John's small house about 2 miles inland. It was a modest single-story place with hurricane shutters and a yard that looked more practical than decorative. He invited me in, but I declined, too shaken to do anything but go home and try to process what had happened. "Meet me tomorrow at Rosie's Diner off Highway 41, he said before getting out. 9 a.m., I'll explain everything. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face peeling away, revealing the thing underneath. I saw the not John rising from the pool, its body distorted and wrong. By the time my alarm went off, I'd maybe gotten 3 hours of broken sleep. Rosie's Diner was an old-school place with vinyl booths and waitresses who called everyone honey. It sat almost 20 miles from Sunset Cove, which seemed intentional. John was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth far from windows or other customers. 2 coffee cups sat on the table, one in front of him and one at the empty spot across. I slid into the booth, the seat squeaking under me. John looked as tired as I felt, with dark circles under his eyes and a tight expression that showed he hadn't slept either. "You came," he said, sounding a little surprised. "You said you'd explain everything." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, grateful for its warmth. After what I saw last night, I need answers. The waitress came by to refill our cups and take our orders. John asked for eggs and toast. I went with pancakes. Neither of us was actually hungry, but ordering food gave us an excuse to stay. When she left, John took a long drink of his coffee and set the mug down. "What do you know about boundaries?" "Like property lines? Like the boundaries between worlds?" He leaned forward, voice dropping lower. "Most places the boundary is solid. Here and there stay separate. But some locations, they're like thin spots in fabric. Worlds press against each other." I thought about the things I'd seen at Sunset Cove over the past month. "And the water park is one of those places?" John nodded. "The original spot. The sinkhole where those people drowned in the 70s. It's a junction point. A place where our world and something else come close enough to touch." The waitress brought our food and we stopped talking for a moment. When she left, John kept explaining as he cut up his eggs. "My grandfather discovered it in the 50s. He was a developer looking for cheap land, but he was also interested in other things. Occult things. He recognized what that sinkhole was. So he built a water park on top of it? That seems like a bad idea." John pushed his eggs around his plate. "Not if your goal is containment. Water has power. It can act as a conduit or a barrier depending on how it's used. My grandfather designed the entire park as a containment system. For the things in the water, and that woman. For everything that can slip through from the other side. The park man, the woman in white. They're just the most persistent. There are others. You saw some during the fog event. I hadn't touched my pancakes. The syrup was congealing around them, forming a sticky moat. What are they?" I don't know what they were originally. Things that died wrong, maybe. Things that never lived in our sense of the word. They want to be here. In our world. They want bodies, experiences, lives. John looked up from his plate. They want to be real. A shiver ran through me as I remembered what John had told me about the woman behind the maintenance shed. She isn't real anymore. The rules aren't random, John continued. They're a binding contract, a set of limitations that contain their influence. As long as we follow the rules, they can only do certain things in certain ways. Break the rules, and you give them permission to take you. Like Drew, I said quietly. John nodded, his expression grim. He broke Rule 4. Open the blue locker. What's in there? Nothing you want to see. John pushed his plate away, having eaten maybe 3 bites. It's a direct access point. A door that shouldn't be opened. I tried to imagine Drew's last moments. Alone in the locker room, curious about what was behind that blue door. Maybe thinking the rules were just a prank on the new guy. Opening it and finding... what? A void? A monster? Or nothing at all until it was too late? Why tell employees the rules without explaining the reasons? Wouldn't people be more careful if they knew the truth? Would you have believed me on your first day? John asked. If I'd told you about entities from another reality living in our pools? Or would you have quit on the spot? Or worse, stayed but thought I was crazy and ignored the rules? He had a point. I wouldn't have believed any of it without seeing it for myself. But that didn't mean the current system was working. Those symbols in the employee files, the ones on the status unknown cases, they match your tattoo, don't they? John's hand moved unconsciously to his left forearm, covered by his long-sleeved shirt. Yes. Show me. After pausing for a second, John rolled up his sleeve. On his inner forearm was a tattoo of connected symbols, circles joined by lines, strange angular shapes, and characters that didn't belong to any alphabet I knew. The design was exactly the same as the red marks I'd seen in those employee files. My grandfather designed it based on what he learned about the entities. It's a protection of sorts and a binding. The Sullivan family mark. John rolled his sleeve back down. My father wore it. Now I do. Your father was the guardian before you? He took over when my grandfather got too old. I've been doing it since he died 15 years ago. The pieces started clicking together. So it's a family business, containing whatever's on the other side of that boundary. John nodded. 3 generations so far. Why not just close the park? Drain the pools, tear it all down? Because the containment system is the park. The layout of the pools, the circulation system, even the height of the slides. It's all part of the design. Destroy that, and there's nothing holding them back. John's eyes met mine, deadly serious. If the park closes, they're free to go wherever they want. The reality of what he was saying sank in. Sunset Cove wasn't just a water park with a supernatural problem. It was a supernatural prison disguised as a water park. And John wasn't just a watchful lifeguard. He was the warden. That's why we reopened right after Drew disappeared, I realized. Why the park never stays closed for long after incidents. The system has to keep running. Exactly. My grandfather built it to last, but it needs maintenance. It needs guardians. John took a sip of his coffee, now cold. Which brings me to why I asked you here. You want me to quit, I guessed. Actually, I want you to stay. I stared at him in surprise. You've survived a month. You've seen what's really happening and you haven't run away screaming. You follow the rules. John leaned forward. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands the real job. To be what? Your apprentice guardian? To be my backup. I can't be everywhere at once, as last night proved. The memory of the fake John in the pool sent another chill through me. That thing looked exactly like you. They can imitate what they see. It's how they hunt. The waitress came by again, eyeing our barely touched food with concern. She offered refills on coffee, which we both accepted more out of social obligation than desire. When she left, John continued. I can arrange for a pay increase. Hazard pay, essentially. Robert knows enough to approve it without asking questions. I sat back in the booth, trying to process everything. John was offering me money to keep working at a supernatural danger zone, helping him maintain some occult containment system his grandfather had built. The practical part of me noted that extra money would help with tuition. The survival part of me screamed that I'd be insane to go back there. What if I say no? I asked. Then you walk away. Find another summer job. Try to forget what you've seen. John's expression softened slightly. I wouldn't blame you. It's not a burden anyone should have to take on. I thought about all the people who visited Sunset Cove every day. Families with children, teenagers on dates, seniors doing water aerobics. None of them knew what was hiding beneath the surface, what swam in the water with them. They were protected by John's watchfulness and a set of rules most of them would never know existed. I also thought about the missing lifeguards from previous summers, about Drew, about how easily I could have been one of them if I hadn't followed the rules. I'm sorry, I said finally. I can't do it. John nodded, not looking surprised. I understand. I need normal right now. Classes start back in a few weeks, and You don't have to explain, he cut in. Most people make the same choice. We sat in silence for a minute. Outside the diner, cars passed on the highway, people going about their ordinary lives, unaware of the things I now knew existed. What do I need to do? I asked. To leave safely, I mean. Return your uniform. I'll handle the paperwork with Robert. John reached into his pocket and pulled out a small card with a phone number handwritten on it. If you ever see anything, the woman in white, the pool man, any sign of them outside the park, call me immediately. I took the card and put it in my wallet, trying not to think about how I'd left my actual wallet at the park last night, the very thing that had nearly gotten me killed. There's one more thing, John added, his voice grave. Never go back to any body of water associated with the park. Not the pools, not the beach access points nearby, not even the drainage canals that connect to our system. You think they'd find me? I know they would. They've seen you now. They'll remember. His eyes held mine, making sure I understood. They don't give up once they've chosen a target. An hour later, I was back at Sunset Cove, but I didn't go inside. John had texted Robert, who brought my things out to the parking lot. My wallet, a few personal items from my locker, and my final paycheck. Sorry to see you go, Robert said, not quite meeting my eyes. He knew why I was leaving, even if we didn't speak of it directly. You were a good lifeguard. Thanks for the opportunity, I replied, the formality of the exchange almost comical given what we both knew. I handed over my lifeguard whistle. Just a simple object that represented a summer job that had turned into a nightmare. As I drove away from Sunset Cove Water Park for the final time, I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see the woman in white standing in the road behind me or the weird figure of the pool man coming up from a drainage ditch. But the road stayed empty, the day bright and normal. That night I started writing everything down, all I'd seen, all I'd learned, the rules that had kept me alive. Maybe it was therapy, a way to process the insanity of the past month. Maybe it was a warning, though I wasn't sure who I was warning or how they'd ever find my account. Somewhere out there, the job posting that had drawn me to Sunset Cove would soon appear again. Lifeguards wanted, competitive pay, no experience necessary. Another college student would need summer money. Another person would enter the cycle John's family had kept going for generations. I closed my laptop and tried not to think about the thin places between worlds, or what might be looking through from the other side.